People in the Montana Territory loved to talk. That's why the whispers started long before the stagecoach ever reached the ranch. Folks said Elias Kane had finally lost his mind. A rancher with land, money, and a respected family name, buying a mail-order bride nobody else wanted. In a western small town full of gossip, that kind of rumor traveled faster than a prairie fire. Elias stood waiting in the cold morning air, hands in his coat pockets, eyes on the road. He told himself this was only a business arrangement, the kind frontier life sometimes demanded. A man couldn't run a ranch alone forever. Someone had to cook, keep house, and soften the edges of the endless silence. Maybe the town saw weakness in that choice. Elias saw survival. The stagecoach arrived late, wheels crusted with frozen mud. The driver called his name with a half smirk, like he already knew the joke. A woman stepped down, wrapped in black from hat to boots. A thick veil hid everything: hair, eyes, identity. "Mr. Kane?" Her voice didn't tremble. "I'm Lenora Hart." Elias expected someone nervous or ashamed. Instead, she stood straight, chin up, like a woman who'd faced storms far worse than judgment. He nodded. "You're welcome here." Lenora reached for the veil, fingertips pausing for a breath, as if bracing herself for impact. Then she lowered it. Half her face carried burn scars, tight skin that drew her smile into a crooked line, marks carved across her temple and jaw. But the other half? Gentle, clear-eyed, striking. Not a tragedy, not a monster. A scarred heroine who had lived through fire and was still standing. Elias didn't move, didn't speak. Every word he had rehearsed disappeared. The wind seemed to stop just to see what he'd do next. Most men would have flinched, some would have laughed. Others might have turned away. Lenora watched his silence like she'd seen it 100 times before. "If you want to cancel the arrangement," she said. Quietly, "I'll take the next coach east." Elias finally swallowed. "No." His voice came out rough. "You came all this way. This ranch is yours now, same as mine." For the first time, Lenora's eyes flickered with something close to hope, or maybe exhaustion. Their hands didn't touch. They didn't smile. But in a world where cowboy heartbreak was easier than cowboy romance, this was a beginning, fragile, uneasy, real. Behind them, the ranch house stood large and lonely against the winter skyline. Elias had brought home a bride no one wanted, and for the first time in years, the house didn't feel quite as empty. House of dust, woman of order. Elias led Lenora through the yard, boots crunching over frozen earth. The ranch house looked sturdy from the outside, but winter had a way of revealing truth. Hinges groaned. Wind pushed through loose window frames. A place built for a family had been standing half awake for years. He opened the door for her. "It's not much," he muttered. Her gaze swept over everything at once. Torn curtains, weeks of dust. A kitchen that remembered canned beans more than fresh bread. This wasn't neglect, it was loneliness. The kind that settles into the floorboards. Without asking, Lenora slipped off her gloves, folded them neatly, and found a rag near the basin. She wiped the kitchen table with slow, careful strokes, like she'd done it 1,000 times. Elias watched, unsure why he felt guilty. "You'll take the front bedroom," he said, clearing his throat. "It's warmer." "I'll take the small room near the kitchen," Lenora replied. "Makes my work easier." "This isn't about work. It should be. It keeps things simple." He wanted to argue, but her voice had that firm, respectful tone that ranchers used with skittish horses, never loud, always steady. So he nodded. That night, Elias lay in the big room, his late wife's room. He stared at the ceiling, listening to every sound. The house felt different with another heartbeat inside it. He wondered what the town would say when they saw her. Bitterroot was the kind of western small town where kindness could turn sharp in a blink. In the smaller room, Lenora sat awake by the window. The moonlight softened her scars into gentle shadows. She pressed her palm against the glass. It was cold, but still warmer than the world she'd left behind. A cowboy protector wasn't something she expected. She only hoped she wouldn't be sent away like so many times before. She whispered to herself, "1 week. If he changes his mind, I walk." The morning brought chores, cattle to feed, horses restless from the storm. Elias saddled up at dawn, leaving her to the house. When he returned at noon, he found the floors swept, curtains repaired with neat stitches, dishes scrubbed until they shined. The kitchen smelled of biscuits and coffee, a miracle he hadn't tasted in 3 winters. "You didn't need to do all this," he said. Lenora set a mug in front of him. "A ranch can't run on dust." There was no flirtation, no forced sweetness, just quiet confidence. And something strange happened. Elias sat, drank the coffee, and for the first time in years, realized the house didn't feel dead anymore. Outside, a hawk cried over the snowfield. Inside, 2 strangers shared silence that didn't hurt. A mail-order bride story wasn't meant to feel important. Frontier marriage wasn't supposed to change a man. But watching Lenora fix what time had undone, Elias wondered if this Western love story was just beginning to breathe. Bitterroot looks and barbed tongues. By the end of the week, word had spread across Bitterroot like wildfire on dry grass. Elias Kane had brought home a bride. Not just any bride, a mail-order bride with scars the town would never ignore. Folks in a Western small town could forgive a thief faster than they forgave a woman who looked different. Elias hitched the wagon before dawn. Supplies were low, and winter wasn't finished with Montana. Lenora pulled her veil across her face. She didn't ask if she should. She already knew how people watched anything that didn't fit. The road to town was frozen hard, every wheel rattle echoing between them. Elias wanted to speak, but the right words kept slipping away. Apologies felt useless. Promises felt heavy. All he managed was, "If anyone speaks out of line, you tell me." Lenora didn't look at him. "I've heard worse than words." Bitterroot's main street was already awake, smoke curling from chimneys, horses tied outside the saloon, children hopping across ice patches. Conversation stopped as the wagon rolled by. Heads turned. Some stared openly, others pretended not to. Mrs. Wilkes, the preacher's wife, rushed forward with a smile sweeter than spoiled milk. "Mr. Kane, and this must be your arrangement." Her eyes drifted to the veil with dramatic sympathy. "Bless your charitable heart." Lenora gripped her skirt but stayed silent. Elias kept his jaw locked tight. Inside the general store, things got worse. 2 young women giggled behind sacks of flour, whispering loud enough to be heard. The shopkeeper stared too long. A man near the stove nudged his friend, smirking as Lenora walked past. Elias felt something in him coil tight. The last thing he wanted was trouble, but defending her felt as natural as breathing. Before he spoke, Lenora lifted a 50-pound sack of grain, something most men struggled with, and carried it outside without a word. That silenced a few mouths. On the ride home, the wagon creaked and the wind stung like needles. Elias finally said, "You don't have to prove anything." Lenora kept her gaze on the empty horizon. "I'm not proving anything to them. I'm proving it to myself." He stared at her hands, rough, scarred, steady. She wasn't a woman broken by life. She was one rebuilt with stronger bones. "People, they will talk," Elias said softly. "They always talk," she answered. "The question is whether we listen." For the first time, Elias realized this wasn't a simple rancher romance or a frontier marriage of convenience. This was a woman who had survived fire, humiliation, and loss, and still stood taller than anyone in town. The ranch house came into view, dark windows waiting. Elias glanced at Lenora and finally spoke with clarity. "You're not alone here." A small breath left her chest, almost a sigh, almost relief. Bitterroot had seen a bride no one wanted. Elias had seen the truth, a scarred heroine with more strength than anyone riding those dusty streets. And the story was only starting to shift. Winter's Lock and the thaw winter showed no mercy on the Montana ranch. The sky turned to iron, and snowstorms swept in like they had a score to settle. One morning, the wind hit with such force that Elias couldn't even see the barn from the front porch. The world vanished under white breath. The storm trapped them inside for 3 straight days. During the first hours, Lenora kept to herself. She cooked meals, kept the fire alive, and spoke only when needed. Elias fixed gear in the corner, pretending he wasn't watching her every move. Silence settled over the house, quiet, heavy, almost freezing. By evening of the first night, the fire dimmed, shadows stretched across the room, and neither of them wanted to admit the loneliness creeping back in. Lenora pulled out an old tin box she'd brought from her travels. Inside were folded scraps of paper poems, puzzles, bits of writing that had survived her journey. She read one aloud. Her voice was soft, calm, strange in a house used to nothing but wind. Elias looked up, caught off guard. "You read?" She smiled a little. "Words kept me company when people didn't." The second day, they found the checkerboard pushed behind a half-broken drawer. Lenora had never played, so Elias taught her. She was terrible at it, laughed at herself each time he stole half the board. That laugh hit him like warm coffee after a cold ride. Her smile didn't hide the scars, and somehow, that made it more real. "You're letting me win," she accused. "Ma'am, I could never play that kindly," he said with a grin. Something cracked open between them. Not romance, not yet, just comfort. A slow-burn Western romance wasn't built from grand speeches. It was built from small pieces of ordinary life stitched together until the silence no longer hurt. By the third day, the storm softened. The wind calmed. Snow piled high against the windows. Lenora curled up in a chair with a book and started reading again. Halfway through a sentence, her voice slowed, hands loosened, and sleep took her. Elias sat nearby, pretending not to notice, but he did. Every detail. The way the fire painted gold across her hair. The way her shoulders finally relaxed. She hadn't slept peacefully in weeks. He could see that now. Without thinking, he lifted her from the chair. She weighed almost nothing. Her head rested against his chest, trusting without even knowing it. Warmth from the fire followed them down the hall. He laid her gently in the small bed, pulled the blanket up, and stepped back as if the moment might shatter. For a long time, he stood in the doorway, breath tight, heart unfamiliar and unsteady. Something in him had changed. Something in the house had changed too. Morning came. The storm was gone. The world was quiet. But the quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive. Gifts and ghosts. When the thaw came, the ranch breathed again. Snow melted off the barn roof in heavy sheets, and the first hints of spring pushed through frozen dirt. Elias rode into Bitterroot for supplies, leaving Lenora at the ranch to tend the house. She cleaned, mended old curtains, scrubbed stubborn stains from the kitchen floor, and for a few hours forgot she was someone the world liked to whisper about. Elias returned that afternoon carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. He handed it to her without ceremony. No speech, no warning, just quiet eyes and cold hands. "What's this?" Lenora asked. "You'll see." She unfolded the paper slowly. Inside was a length of blue calico fabric, soft and new, something she had never owned since the fire that changed her life. Her fingers trembled as she touched it. No one in years had given her anything without strings attached. "This must have been expensive," she whispered. Elias shook his head. "Every woman deserves something beautiful." He didn't say the rest, that she deserved far more than she believed. She set the fabric down like it might vanish and looked at the man who'd bought a bride no one wanted. He wasn't polished or poetic, but he was trying. And in a Western love story built on scars and second chances, trying meant everything. That evening, they sat on the porch while the sun dipped low, painting the sky in orange and ash. Lenora worked the blue calico between her fingers, measuring pieces against her lap. Elias whittled wood, carving without much skill but with stubborn determination. When she leaned her shoulder against him, just a small touch, barely there, Elias went still. The wind stilled too, as though the world wanted to see what he'd do. For the first time, he lifted his hand and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. His thumb grazed the burnt skin along her jaw. Not with pity, not with hesitation, just touch soft, human, real. Lenora didn't move, didn't flinch. Her eyes met his, uncertain but hopeful. The moment felt fragile and enormous all at once. Then something invisible sliced through it. Elias pulled back, breath-catching. His late wife, Anna, seemed to sit between them like a ghost made of memory and guilt. The ranch, the house, the silence, they all still belonged to her shadow. Elias wasn't ready for this. His heart wasn't finished grieving, and fear rushed in faster than courage. Lenora felt him retreat. She straightened, folded the fabric carefully, and stood. "It's getting late," she said softly. "Good night, Elias." She walked inside and closed her door. A soft click of a lock, a quiet wall built in 2 seconds. Elias stayed on the porch long after night swallowed the ranch. He stared at the empty chair where Lenora had sat. He had faced storms, wolves, and winters that could kill a man, but nothing felt as dangerous as the thought of caring for her. Inside, Lenora rested the blue fabric on her bedside table. For a long time, she just stared at it. It was the first gift she'd received in years. She turned off the lamp with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. The house slept, but neither of them truly did. The offer that poisoned Elias spent the next days working the far pasture. Long hours, heavy labor, anything to outrun whatever he had felt on that porch. Lenora noticed at his absence. She didn't complain. She didn't ask questions. Instead, she worked harder, scrubbing soot from the stove, stitching torn shirts, filling the house with the small signs of life it once forgot. But the ranch wasn't the only thing watching her. Marcus Doyle, owner of the Triple D, rich as sin and twice as cruel, rode through the gate one afternoon. His white stallion kicked up dirt, and his smile was the kind that carried knives. Lenora stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. She didn't bother with the veil. If a man came to judge her face, let him see all of it. "Mrs. Kane," Marcus said, tipping his hat with fake courtesy. "Mind if I speak plain?" "Speak," she replied. "Then leave." He laughed. "You're sharp. I like that." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. "I'm offering you a fresh start. $500. Enough for a train ticket east and a life where folks don't stare every time you step outside." Lenora didn't touch it. Marcus leaned closer. "Elias deserves a real wife. Someone he isn't ashamed to be seen with." Her jaw tightened. Her hands, still dusted in flour, curled into fists. "That's enough." He shrugged like it was all just business. "You know the truth. The whole western small town knows it. You sleep in the maid's room. He barely speaks to you. He bought a bride no one wanted. There's no real marriage here." He set the envelope on the porch rail and nudged it toward her. "This just makes things easier. For everyone." With a cruel wink, he rode off, leaving hoofprints and poison behind. Lenora stared at the envelope. She hated how her hands shook. She hated how part of her believed every word he said. Life had taught her to expect abandonment. Why should this be different? By sunset, her suitcase was open on the bed. When Elias returned, smelling of dust and sweat, He found her folding her dress with slow, careful movements. "What are you doing?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Packing. I'll be gone by morning." His stomach dropped. "Why?" Lenora set the fabric down and finally met his eyes. "Do you regret this? Bringing me here?" The question hit harder than any storm. Elias had no script, no practiced answer, just a heart that didn't know how to speak. "It's complicated." Those two words destroyed everything. Lenora's face went empty. No anger, no tears, just silence. A silence heavier than any winter wind. "Then I'll go." Elias watched her turn away, and the world tilted, but fear pinned his voice to his chest. He didn't chase her, didn't stop her. When she walked into her room and shut the door, the house lost its heartbeat again. He stood in the kitchen alone, staring at the envelope Marcus left behind. That money might as well have been a bullet. Sometimes, in a cowboy romance, the villain doesn't come with a gun. Sometimes he comes with words. The letter, the confession, the choice. Lenora walked away before sunrise. The morning sky was pale and colorless, the way a heart feels when it stops expecting anything. She carried only what she owned: a worn dress, a spare apron, the blue calico wrapped carefully at the bottom of her trunk. The path toward Bitterroot stretched ahead, long and empty. Inside the ranch house, Elias stood by the window, frozen in place. He watched her shape grow smaller, then vanish beyond the hill. His mouth opened to call her name, but nothing came out. Fear glued every word to his ribs. For the rest of that day, the house returned to silence. The kind that hurts. Elias didn't shave. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. Work piled up cattle to feed, fences to mend, but he moved like a man underwater. The ranch love story he never planned now lived in a boarding house somewhere far away. Old Tom, the ranch hand who had been with the Kane family since Elias was a boy, found him sitting alone in the spring barn on the fourth night. Tom was rough around the edges, gray-bearded, and wise in the blunt way only old cowboys could manage. "You sitting here waiting for ghosts?" Tom asked. Elias didn't look up. "Maybe." Tom spit tobacco. "Boy, you let a good woman walk because you're scared of feeling anything again. That's not grief. That's cowardice." Elias finally met his eyes. "You don't understand." Tom pulled a folded envelope from his coat. "Actually, you don't understand. This came from a midwife up in Wyoming, a woman who saw a fire like the one folks whisper about." Elias took it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter. It told the truth. Lenora hadn't been born with scars. She survived a boarding house fire set by a drunk rancher fighting over water rights. The man hired on later at Marcus Doyle's ranch, Triple D. The scars were proof of courage, not shame. Elias closed his eyes. Every piece of the puzzle came together like nails in a coffin. "She didn't run from the fire," Tom said. "She helped the children out first. That's how she got burned." Elias felt his throat close. He pictured Lenora lifting those heavy flour sacks, cleaning the house without asking, reading to him in the quiet, carrying pain without complaint. "I can't keep living half alive," he whispered. Sunday morning, church bells rang in Bitterroot. The whole town gathered, unaware that Elias Kane was about to do something no one expected in a western small town filled with gossip. He walked in, late boots muddy, hair wind-tangled, breath unsteady. People stared. He didn't care. He scanned the pews until he found her sitting alone near the back, hands clasped tight. He stepped into the aisle and spoke loud enough for every whisper to stop. "I let my wife walk because I was afraid. Judge her scars, judge mine first." No one breathed. Elias held out his hand. "Come home. Water, fire, and names." When Lenora placed her scard, and in Elias's, the church went silent. Not a breath moved, not a coat rustled. The preacher blinked twice, unsure whether to scold the moment or celebrate it. In a western small town full of judgment, that scene rewrote the rules. Elias didn't wait for permission. He led her out of the pews, out of the whispers, and into the sunlight. Old Tom clapped once, then twice, until half the congregation joined in. Not everyone, but enough. On the wagon ride back to the ranch, Lenora stayed quiet. The fields, once white with frost, now showed dark patches of earth spring trying its best to win. "Why did you change your mind?" she asked softly. Elias looked at her, hands tight on the reins. "Because you weren't the one running. I was." She turned away, tears threatening but refusing to fall. She'd been strong for too many years to break now. But life in Montana never lets peace last long. 2 days later, Elias found that the creek feeding his land had been diverted. A new wooden gate sat in the water, redirecting flow toward the Triple D, Doyle's handiwork. The man couldn't stand losing control, especially not to a woman he had tried to buy off. Without water, the cattle would weaken, the hayfields would die, the ranch would fall. Elias stormed back to the house, ready for a fight. But he found Lenora already at the kitchen table, maps spread across the wood, old survey charts from the territorial office, stained with ink and time. "There's an old irrigation ditch here," she said, pointing. "Overgrown and forgotten, but if we dig it out, we can bring the creek back. You can read territorial maps?" "I used to help my father with land records," she answered. "Before the fire." Elias nodded. "Then we'll dig." They weren't alone. Tom grabbed a shovel. 2 neighbor women widows, who knew the weight of tools better than gossip, showed up at sunrise. Together, they carved earth by hand. Lenora's palms split. Her arms shook. But she kept digging. Pioneer resilience wasn't just a story people told. It was sweat, grit, and stubborn hope. Before dawn the next morning, water pushed through the cleared ditch. First a trickle, then a stream, then a flood of cold silver life heading straight back toward the Kane Ranch. When Doyle arrived to rage and threaten, Lenora met him at the fence. "You're trespassing on my rights," he snapped. Lenora wiped mud from her cheek. "Water doesn't know your name." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Elias stepped beside her. "And neither does the law." Doyle rode off without a word, but his silence was loaded like a gun. That night, the ranch lights glowed warm, bread baked in the oven. The creek ran where it belonged. For the first time, when Elias looked at Lenora, he saw not just a scarred heroine, but his partner. The reckoning at Miller's Yard. Doyle didn't take his defeat with grace. Men like him never did. When power slipped through their fingers, they clawed for it in the darkness. 2 days after the water returned to the Kane Ranch, word spread that Doyle had gone to the sheriff, claiming Elias stole the creek and threatened his men. The sheriff posted a notice. Livestock could be seized until the dispute was settled. Elias read the notice once, jaw clenched. He looked toward the ranch house, knowing exactly what Doyle intended. If the cattle were taken, the ranch would fall by summer. "Let me handle this," Lenora said quietly. "You shouldn't have to." She lifted her chin. "I know, but I will." The next morning, she rode to Bitterroot alone. No veil, no fear, only purpose. She walked into Miller's Yard, where wagons gathered and townspeople shopped for feed and tools. It was the busiest place in town, perfect for what needed to happen. "Sheriff," she called, loud enough to stop a dozen conversations. "I have something to show you." The sheriff, a solid man with tired eyes, stepped forward. Doyle stood beside him, arms crossed, wearing a grin smug enough to sour milk. Lenora reached into her coat and pulled out the letter from Wyoming. The wind snapped it once like a banner. "This is a statement from a midwife," she said. "She survived the boarding house fire I was scarred in. The man who started it worked for Triple D right after." She looked Doyle dead in the eye. "That's your brand, isn't it?" A hush spread across the yard. Lenora continued. I wasn't running from that fire. I was pulling children out. Ask anyone in White Rock. Mrs. Wilkes, the preacher's wife, who once smiled with pity, covered her mouth. The blacksmith lowered his hammer. Even the sheriff blinked hard, like dust had gotten in his eyes. Doyle stepped forward, sputtering. "This is lies. The woman is unstable. Look at..." "Don't," Lenora warned, her voice sharp enough to cut through bone. "You judged my face. Now hear the truth. You paid the man who burned that place. You thought scars made me small, but you're the one shrinking now." Elias arrived then, breathless from riding hard. He stood beside her without a word. Just presence. Just loyalty. The sheriff turned to Doyle. "Is any of this true?" Doyle tried to speak. Nothing came out. The sheriff took Doyle's pistol and badge. "You won't threaten this ranch again." For the first time, Bitterroot breathed different. Folks didn't stare at Lenora's scars, they stared at her strength. Elias stepped forward. "You all saw her. That's what courage looks like." Silence, then applause. Slow at first, just Tom, just Mrs. Wilkes. Then others joined. Not all, but enough. Lenora felt something lift from her shoulders. Not the scars, they were part of her, but the shame that never belonged to her in the first place. Elias touched her hand, not gently, not nervously, just right. "You ready to go home?" he asked. This time, she smiled with her whole face, not half. "Yes, home sounds right. Covenant, not contract." Summer came to the Kane Ranch like it had been waiting for years. Grass rose in thick green waves across the pasture. The creek that Doyle tried to steal ran clear and strong. Birds nested along the cottonwoods, and for the first time in a very long time, the place felt alive. The house changed too. Fresh curtains swayed in the windows. New coats of paint covered old cracks. The smell of fresh bread replaced dust. The big ranch that once echoed with loneliness now carried laughter, footsteps, the clink of coffee cups, and the easy rhythm of two people learning how to live side by side. The marriage license, once tucked away like a formality, now hung framed in the kitchen. But every visitor knew the truth. Paper didn't build, this homework did. Quiet moments did. Choosing each other every morning did. One evening, Elias sat on the porch in his rocking chair, boots propped on the rail. Fireflies blinked across the yard, tiny sparks rising from the tall grass. Lenora brought out 2 slices of warm rhubarb pie, the kind he used to only dream about. He watched her cross the porch, hair pulled back, scars uncovered, sunlight catching the softer side of her smile. She didn't hide anymore. Not from the town, not from him, and not from herself. "You didn't say it was ready," Elias teased, taking the plate. "You didn't ask," she replied. They ate in relaxed silence, a comfort built from months of shared chores, inside jokes, small touches, a kind of frontier love that didn't need grand gestures. After a while, Lenora set her plate aside. "Elias," she said, voice gentle, "do you ever regret it? That day I stepped off that stagecoach?" He leaned back, hands resting behind his head. "Every day," he said. She went still. The wind slowed, her breath caught. He turned to her, eyes steady. "I regret every day I let fear talk first. I regret the nights I sat alone in that room thinking, love ended with loss. I should have welcomed you without hesitation. I should have seen you for who you are." Lenora's throat tightened. Years of hurt from whispers, from stares, from being judged for her scars, rose to the surface and finally started to fade. "You can say that to me now," she whispered, "because you're not afraid anymore." Elias reached for her hand. "I was never afraid of you, only of losing something again." She leaned in, and their foreheads touched. No rush, no uncertainty, just 2 hearts that had traveled through fire, storms, and silence to reach the same porch. The kiss came slow and sure, warm, certain, real. Later, as the sky darkened and the stars appeared, Elias pulled an old quilt over their shoulders. Lenora rested her head against him. The ranch glowed behind them, windows bright, chimney smoke curling like a promise. Life wasn't perfect. Scars didn't vanish. The world still judged sometimes. But here, in this place, love chose them both. Not because of need, not because of a contract, because, at last, it felt like home. And when the first summer rain began to fall, soft drops tapping against the porch roof, they didn't move from their rocking chairs. They just held hands and let the world wash clean.